Okay, I want to take a second and kind of go over some more details with respects to making requests to APIs because this is very new for you guys. And you've been using the internet most of your life, but you probably had never, done this aspect of it. Most people, when they use the internet, the extent of using the internet is, hey, I put the URL into the browser, I hit enter, it goes to the web page. Okay, you never have to really think about what this URL actually is doing or what it means. And you definitely do not need to know about how the data is being sent back and forth because all that is technical. They don't want the technical stuff to be shown to normal people because it's off-putting. All right, but now that we're developers, we get into the nitty-gritty of things. So let's go back to Postman. All right, so there we go. So I've got my API request I made to Scryfall. Scryfall is an API that keeps track of information regarding Magic the Gathering, which is a strategy card game, for those of you who don't know. Uh, there are thousands and thousands of cards in this game with their own artwork and what year they were published in and what rule sets they're allowed in and not allowed in. It's a lot of information. So let's say I was making a website that, a fan site, like I'm a fan of Magic the Gathering and I want a website that keeps track of like my decks. Okay, the decks I make and like what decks I have, what cards I own, that sort of thing. Okay, there's lots of sites actually like that. So for example, let me give you Mana Stack is the one I use. Okay, so it gives you a list of decks, okay, that you own. Like so, for example, these are the ones I have. I'm going to and this is like all the cards that are in the deck, and you notice like each card has like an image associated with it, rule set, things like that. So there's a lot of data here. Okay, there's a lot of data with respect to Magic the Gathering cards. If I were making this website, I don't want to keep all this data myself, okay, or to have to go out and maintain it. That's too much. So I'm going to use the Scryfall API, and the Scryfall API will give me the information I need in order to make my website. Okay, cool. So let's get into the nitty gritty, right? Remember, these are the HTTP verbs. You care about the first five. Get, post, put, patch, delete. All right, get and post are the ones we're going to mainly be using. All right, get means you want to get information from their server. Post means you want to send information to their server. Most of the time when you're working with a third-party API, so I don't own Scryfall, they're their own entity wherever they're at. They are third party. I don't have anything to do with them. Okay, I can probably only get information from them. Okay, they should have documentation with regard to their API. So I type in Scryfall API documentation. Right, they should have documentation. They're a professional company, so their API documentation is going to be very good. It has like, here are the rules. Like, here's how you can use our API and how you cannot use our API. Here are what the information our API has, and they should be able to. They'll give you the endpoints. All right, so let's talk about endpoints for a second. Remember, you can't go to McDonald's and order okra, right? At least not in Michigan. So you cannot go to their API and just willy-nilly ask it for whatever you want. They give you their menu. Their menu is the endpoints. You know it's the endpoint because it says like slash something. In this case, one of the endpoints is slash cards slash search. That is an endpoint. Another endpoint is slash cards slash random. Okay, this is what you can do with Scryfall. Okay, and they have different endpoints. They've organized their endpoints based around like one endpoint set of endpoints is for sets. One is for cards. Okay, another set of endpoints is for rulings. Okay, about like what cards are legal or not legal, or I'm not exactly sure. Card symbols. Okay, it's really nice. Okay, they have a lot of information about Magic the Gathering, and these are the endpoints. The way you call an API is you need their base URL, which they should provide you, and then if they're good documentation. So here's the base URL. Everything is going to start with this. That's why it's called the base URL. So I would take this. Okay, I'm going to make a new request, and I start off with this. Now I add the endpoint. Okay, the extra information that tells me like where exactly I'm going. So for example, I would like to search for Tulane. Okay, they have an endpoint for searching /card/search. All right, so I'm going to add that in to my base URL /cards/search. Fantastic. That lets me search for a card. Now, usually you might need like more information. So, for example, it makes sense I want to search for something, but Scryfall needs to have some information for me to let it know what I'm searching for, right? I can't just be blank. So, if I do it like this, just willy-nilly, I get an error. Code, bad request, status 400. You didn't enter anything to search for, all right? This is a professional API. It gives me an object back that is the error. Now let's talk about the status codes. Okay, 400, bad request, right? Remember, 200 is everything went okay and hunky-dory. 400 means bad request. There are a bunch of different status codes. They're from 100 to 599. They're organized into 5 categories. Okay, so the successful responses will be from 200 to 299. They're all successful, but they're just different kinds of success. The ones you mainly are concerned about will be in like the server error responses or the client error responses, 400 through 599. So let's take a look at. Okay, I'm using the MDM web docs. They're great for you to figure out like what these codes mean. So like Postman will give you like, for example, 400 bad request. Let's go look at what that means. So I'll go back to the top. Client error responses. 400 bad requests. The server cannot or will not process the request due to something that is perceived to be a client error. I am the client. Okay, so let's make sure we understand the vocabulary. I am the client. I am consuming the Scryfall API. Okay, I am the client. I am making a request to their API. I did something wrong. Okay, I did not give them something to search for. Right? There's like I want to search. Cool. Scryfall's like, cool. You want to search? What do you want to search for? I didn't give it to them, so they're like, okay, bro, sorry, we can't do that. You didn't enter anything to search for. Okay, so they'll give you like if they're a well-made API, like this is really nice. It gives me the correct status code. It also tells me like what I did wrong, so I can be like, oh, I'm sorry. I needed to search for something. Okay, let me go back to the documentation for Scryfall. All right, how do I search for something? All right, I can search for things in a lot of different ways. Okay, I want to do a full text search. Okay, so make sure your parameter is probably encoded, blah, 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 blah. So it gives you a parameter. Okay, you can think of a parameter like a variable. All right, because the thing that we're searching for is variable. It could depend on what we want. Here, okay, I am going to do Q. I think it was P or Q. Let me try P. Yeah, so this thing is Q because it's query, right? So, yep, it's a Q. So here's how this works. I've got my base URL. I've got my endpoint. It needs a parameter, okay? You'll notice that it says query parameters right here. We're going to pass in a parameter. The way you do that, there's 2 ways. You can do it through Postman, but I want to show you the manual way first. After you put your base URL endpoint, if you have parameters, you can put a question mark, and then the name of the parameter is equal to, and then whatever you want. So let's go through that again. I put my base URL, scryfall.com, then have my endpoint, card search. Then I would like to put in a parameter because this part is variable. You do question mark. The documentation says the parameter is Q. Okay, cool. Q is equal to Tulane. So let's go search. So I've got this is now my fully formed request. Okay, this is my request. I would like to go to scryfall.com and search for a card called Tulane. Okay, 200. Okay, got stats at 200, meaning my request was successful. Okay, I got my JSON back, and here is Tulane Teller of Tales, which is the deck I just built. All right, so all the stuff about Tulane, and there we go. All right, so now you can kind of get a sense of how to work with the API. Sometimes they'll ask for parameters, and you can put them into the URL like this. After you do your base URL and the endpoint, you can do a question mark, and then the name of the parameter. maybe ask me, well, Jonathan, how do I know, like, is Q special? Well, Q is because I went to the documentation and got Q. You have to go to the API's documentation because every API is different. Okay, there's nothing special about Q or unique or order or any of these. These are for Scryfall. If it's a different API, they will have their own API documentation, and you need to follow whatever documentation they give you. Okay, there is no, like, that part there isn't a standard. There's a standard in that there's a syntax. So you have a question mark and the name of the parameter and equals. That part is standard. The actual name for the parameter is whatever the API people decided it was going to be. Okay, so that is why I'm harping on about this documentation, is because this is the thing you need to read that tells you how to work with their API. Common mistake even like mid-level developers make is that they refuse to, like, they just try to like put stuff in and they don't really work with the API documentation. You have to go here. Okay, there's no other psychic way that you're going to be able to know how to work with this. Now you can play with a lot of these other things and figure out like what you would like back. So like they give you example requests here too. So like this is really cool. Like find red creatures with 3 power sorted by converted mana cost. And let's actually put this in. I'm going to take this and explain it. Alrighty, so again, we're searching for cards. We got that question mark, right? Order, like what order I want to show them in, equals CMC. Okay. Now, if you would like more than one parameter, which is kind of cool, you can use this and symbol. So we have order equals CMC and Q equals. All right. So we're having like multiple parameters. I have a parameter for order and a parameter for the query itself. So order equals CMC and Q equals, and then use percents in you can have spaces, or there's certain characters you cannot have in a URL, so you have to like use percentages to like do spaces, which is fine, and then you can therefore do a very specialized search. So I'm getting specifically all red creatures with 3 power sorted by converted mana cost. So that's pretty freaking cool. All right. So this API is very powerful. I can search for things on a very specific fine-grained level, or I can do like a general search, okay, by name. I mean, it's really great. But now you have some idea about like how you can form the URL to get what you want. Okay, so you have to go to the documentation. You have to understand the basics. You start off with the base URL, then the endpoint / something. Again, the documentation will tell you. If you need parameters, you may not need parameters. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. You start off with a question mark, the name of the parameter equals, and then what you would like. And then you can hit send. And then play around with it, and then it should give you a 200 if everything went okay. If you get something that's not a 200, you can use this documentation and look up the code, and the code will tell you what went wrong. Okay, so for example, common one is 404, not found. The server cannot find the requested resource. When you ask the server for something, it couldn't find it. Okay, we had the one earlier, okay, which was bad request. I'm going to do that one again. Okay, 400 bad requests. What does 400 bad requests mean? Well, let's look at the documentation. The server cannot or will not process the request due to something that is perceived to be a client error. If you get nothing else from this video, you'll notice that documentation is a part of your life now. Okay, I don't expect you to remember all of these codes and what they mean. Eventually, you will know what 400, 404, 200, because they'll have occurred like 100 times, and you'll eventually learn it. You still need to go back to the documentation, because the documentation will tell you this is what's happening. Okay, this is how all this standardization of codes and all this way in which you write URLs, it's all there so that developers can work with each other's systems without tearing their hair out.